So how is a nation actually made? It's not something you just draw up on a map. No, it's something that gets hammered into shape, over centuries of conflict, invasion, and just sheer will. Today, we're going to dive into that chaotic, brutal, and absolutely foundational story of how England, well, became England.
So let's just kick things off with that big question right there. What does it really take to build a nation, from scratch? Is it just about having a shared language, or maybe a common belief system? Or is it something, I don't know, forged in the heat of battle?
Well, for ancient Britain, the answer was pretty much all of the above. And it all came crashing in, wave after wave, with invaders who left their mark on everything: the land, the language, the people. Seriously, this is a story about relentless, nonstop change.
All right, so before we can really get into the invaders who shaped England, we got to back up. We need to look at who was there first. So let's start at the very beginning, with the original shoreline, the island's ancient foundations.
Okay, and this timeline, wow. It just shows you the insane scale of history we're talking about here. I mean, think about it. Way back in 3000 BC, you've got the builders of Stonehenge doing their thing, which is just incredible. Fast forward a couple millennia to 700 BC, and the Celtic tribes show up, taking over with their bronze weapons. Then after a little pop-in from Julius Caesar, the Romans finally arrive to stay in 43 AD. It's a huge sweep of time.
And that's where we get to our first huge wave of change, the Roman order. And look, the Romans weren't just conquerors, not by a long shot. They were builders, they were engineers, they were administrators, and they were about to completely reshape the island for centuries to come.
400 years. Let that sink in for a second. That's how long the Romans ruled Britain. I mean, just to put that into perspective, that's a period of stability, of law and order, that's way longer than the entire history of the United States. So yeah, this wasn't just some brief visit. This was a deep, profound transformation.
And their legacy, it's just staggering. It's so much more than a few old ruins you can visit. They built this incredible network of roads, massive military forts like Hadrian's Wall. They even brought in luxuries like sophisticated baths and villas. But maybe the most important stuff? They introduced a real system of laws and governance and planted the seeds of a brand new religion, Christianity.
But then, it just stopped. Around AD 410, the Roman Empire itself was starting to crumble, so the legions were pulled out of Britain to go defend Rome. And just like that, they were gone. What they left behind was this massive power vacuum. A civilized, pretty organized island, now suddenly wide open and totally vulnerable to whoever wanted to come next.
And you know what happens with a power vacuum, right? It gets filled, and fast. In came this Germanic tide. Invaders from Northern Europe, the Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. This is it. This is the beginning of the Anglo-Saxon period, the moment they start forging what will eventually become Angleland.
And let's be clear, this was not a peaceful move. Not at all. The sources describe them as, and I'm quoting here, ruthless invaders who caused significant havoc, enslaving or driving Britons into the challenging terrain. So we're talking about a really violent, decades-long, even century-long reshaping of the entire island.
And this is so crucial to understand. This Germanic tide didn't just conquer the land, they basically replaced the culture. Their language, this vibrant spoken language we now call Old English, it just took over. And that became the absolute foundation for everything we think of as English culture.
So you'd think after all that, things might settle down, right? Nope. Just as the Anglo-Saxons are getting established, a whole new threat comes screaming over the horizon. This wasn't another tide of settlers. Oh no, this was a storm, the Viking storm. But in the face of that storm, England was about to find its anchor.
The Viking Danes, they were just unbelievably effective raiders. But their impact was so much more than just stealing gold. They were smart about it. They targeted the monasteries, which were the centers of learning and culture. They burned manuscripts. They destroyed schools. It was a cultural catastrophe, really, causing widespread illiteracy.
And this is where King Alfred of Wessex steps in, and we see exactly why they call him the Great. His response was incredible, and it had 4 key parts. First, he fought back. He led a brilliant military campaign against the Danes. Second, he started building. He fortified his kingdom and really started to unite the English people. Third, he focused on education, rebuilding the very monasteries and schools the Vikings had destroyed. And finally, and this is maybe the most important part, he commissioned the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles. Now, this wasn't just writing down history. This was a revolutionary act. He was creating a shared story, a single narrative for his people in their own language. It was a direct pushback against the Viking attempt to erase their culture.
So, after all that, centuries of invasion, constant conflict, what kind of society do you think came out of it all? It wasn't Roman anymore, that's for sure, and it wasn't purely Germanic either. Nope, it was something entirely new. This was Anglo-Saxon England. To really get the Anglo-Saxons, you have to understand their worldview. And right at the core of it was this deep, deep sense of fatalism. I mean, you have to picture their world. Constant violence, short lifespans, brutal winters. For them, life was just this constant, unrelenting struggle against fate.
And that belief, it shaped absolutely everything. The thinking went something like this. If your life is going to be hard and short no matter what you do, then the only thing that really matters is your reputation, how you're remembered after you're gone. Fame, which you earned through heroic action and loyalty to your Lord, was the only real shot at immortality. And this whole mindset, this acceptance of a brutal reality, is exactly what made them such fierce and formidable warriors.
Now, on the religious side of things, this was a huge time of transition. You had the old Germanic paganism, with its warrior gods and pretty informal rituals. But that was slowly giving way to Christianity. It was actually reintroduced in 597 by a mission from Rome, and it offered a totally different way of looking at the world. And over time, it became this incredibly powerful force that helped unite all those different Anglo-Saxon kingdoms.
And what about their society? Well, the social structure was pretty simple, but also really rigid. You basically had two main classes. At the very top were the earls. These were your noble rulers and their best warriors. And then you had the churls. They were the loyal workers, the farmers, the hunters, the craftsmen, basically everyone who did the work to keep the kingdom running. So a lot of people just write this whole period off as the Dark Ages, right? Just a time of violence and ignorance. But when you really look at what was going on, you have to ask a different question. Was it just a dark age? Or were these centuries of brutal conflict, of cultures clashing and mixing, of heroic struggle? Were they actually the painful but necessary birth of the English nation itself? Something to think about.